you're saying, because finding objective good and objective bad is a tricky subject. But I think if you're looking at it from an objective bad point of view, you can start talking about objective ethics, objective morality, objective, which I know a lot of people don't like to do, but I do.
But I'm asking you to provide me a foundation. Like, you have to have a standard, right?
I think I am.
You're not, though. You're asserting that suffering is bad. You're not telling me why. You're not giving me like a standard to measure what badness is. So if this bottle is good, anything that's like short of this bottle or opposite of this bottle would be objective. If this is the objective standard of good, like this broken bottle would be like bad, right? But what is the objective standard of good?
I think that gets fuzzy when you're looking at a great comparison that I've heard, I can't claim credit for it, is health. What's good health is different for everyone. What's good health for you might not be good health for me, etc. But we have a clear definition of what's bad for health. We have a clear definition of what makes someone unhealthy. I think you can do the same with goodness and badness. It's tough sometimes to say what's a good outcome, but it's a lot easier to say what's bad and what's.
Well, you're talking about like we can know what health is, or I can say like what a good bottle is or something, like because it like holds liquid and like I don't want it spilling all over me. Like that's different from like a objective moral standard of right and wrong. Like for something to be morally right and wrong objectively, there has to be a law that is the standard for everybody.
See, I would disagree only because I feel like if you have the principles like I laid out, you won't necessarily need a separate entity, a law-giving entity, which I believe this is going. So if you have, I think you can just examine the evidence. You don't need like a law per se. You can examine what it is to, have a good thing versus a bad thing, and what standard do you use, and like any scientific principle, we can sort of get in there and examine it.
Well, science can't tell you what is right and wrong, though. Like, it can just tell you what is. It can't tell you like what is wrong morally.
I hear you. I disagree though. Like, and I know it's weird. I know that doesn't make any sense. People.
It doesn't.
I know because.
It's like, it's illogical. Like right? Science tells you.
You can't get an ought from
it can give you it can tell you what is, but it cannot tell you what is ought. That's the is-ought fallacy.
Would the health example convince you? Can science tell you what is objectively good health, bad health, without a lawgiver? Can't you examine the evidence of what someone would experience when they're in good health, what someone experiences when they're in bad health?
Well, you could. That's only if life is objectively good. So you have to say, why is life objectively good or is it not? If so, why?
I would put experience over non-experience, because you can't have. Yeah, you can have the possibility of never-ending misery, like the extreme bad I was talking about, but you can't have the option of experiencing anything if you don't exist.
Yeah, but why would that be bad?
So existence, I would say, is objectively good.
You could actually say existence is like worse, because when you exist, you're guaranteed to suffer to some degree. Like you're going to get your feelings hurt.
True.
Your dad's going to die. Your child might die. You might lose all your money and like become homeless. You know what I'm saying? Like you could.
At the end of the day, you tally it up. You might be able to say like, hey, objectively, existence sucked. Maybe. I don't know. I think existing is worth a shot. I think existing is.
Let me like kind of move this along real quick.
Sure.
The reason that you do believe like good and objective moral good and evil exists, and the reason you believe like that life is good, is because you're made in the image of God. Like you are an image bearer of God, and so He has created you. He has stamped His law upon your heart, and so you just know you may not be able to say what it is, which you can't because you haven't. But because you are made in the image of God, you know inherently that things are right and wrong, and that right and wrong actually exist.
In reality.
And so it's because there's an objective lawgiver that we can say, God has stamped his law in our hearts to some degree. We've fallen in sin. We're all sinners, and so the image of God in us has been marred. Like it no longer functions, and so we like see things wrongly. Some people are like, no, it's okay to steal, but then they really know it's not. Like inside, I think they know it's not okay to steal.
Right.
Their conscience bears witness.
I think there's some innate sense of right and wrong, so to speak. Like stealing is bad, murder is bad. I think there's a built-in empathy.
And where does that come from?
Evolution.
Evolution?
I know you didn't like that answer. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, that's what I expect you to say.
I think that over time we've evolved to function in a group setting, and in order to function in a group setting, things like stealing and killing don't go over too well. So
yeah, but if that's the case, they're not actually objectively wrong or right, because look,
correct.
The mechanism of evolution is natural selection, right?
Totally, yes.
Natural selection does what? It ensures that your genetics get passed on to the next generation. So if for my genetics to get passed on to the next generation means that I have to eliminate you and I'm stronger and you're weaker, then like that's not actually wrong. That just is. That's natural selection at work.
Yeah, it's natural pressures. It's not. It doesn't have a mind.
So like I shouldn't be put in jail if I'm like, well, dude, this guy is like competing for this chick that I want to pass my, use to pass on my genetics to the next generation. I got to get him out of the way. So maybe I'll just like beat you up and like be like, no, she's mine, and that would be okay.
Well, since we both know it's not. I think that shows that with humans especially, we have a capacity to think, and especially us being social animals, you find other social animals that aren't gonna be super violent. So it's possible, and humans have just gotten really, really good at it.
You know what I think they've gotten really, really good at? Deceiving themselves.
I agree with that.
So like I think you have deceived yourself. I think like your college professors have deceived you. Like you seem like a smart guy. Or maybe you haven't gone to college, I don't know.
A little bit.
Okay.
I've gone to art school, I don't know if that counts.
Okay. All right. But I mean, you seem intelligent, but I do think that, so like the Word of God tells us that because men did not acknowledge God, they did not worship Him as God, but they worshiped instead the creation rather than the Creator, that He gave them over to a darkened understanding and to futile thinking, and professing to be wise, they became fools, it says.
The only problem is with me being like a non-believer, it doesn't carry too much weight with me. And I hear you, but without me being a believer, that you haven't convinced me first that that there is a God, that I've been made in His image, etc. So the points that you make afterwards are tough for me to absorb because the context of it, I haven't gotten past that first.
Well, that's why I began with like asking you to give me a foundation for things that you do believe like good and evil exist. You have no foundation for them. So I'm trying to say there is a necessary foundation if for to sustain your belief that good and evil actually exists. Like you actually have to borrow from my worldview.
Foundation. It's a weird foundation, granted, but I don't think it needs religion. I think you can evaluate empirical badness, like the suffering example, and you can use that as a basis. You can definitely use that as a basis for deciding, what is good, what's moral and ethical, etc.
But here's why you can't. Like, if I had the power to make everybody suffer for like 20 seconds and then all humanity is wiped out, it wouldn't matter. Like, it wouldn't be wrong or right. Would just be. It wouldn't matter to anything. It wouldn't matter to anybody.
Not once they're dead, there wouldn't be anyone left to worry about it, but you'd still be raising the aggregate suffering, which I would put under the category of objectively bad.
But you have no standard, though. That's what I'm saying. Like, you have no standard to say that suffering is bad.
I think that's its own standard.
What if okay, check this out.
Sure.
The suffering of African Americans brought great happiness to many white people, right?
Okay.
Great riches. They could drink their tea, they could have their sugar, smoke their tobacco, have their clothes made with cotton, and many of them were very rich on it. For hundreds of years, the country, like the overall happiness,
living it up.
the utility of enslaving African Americans was more, perhaps some would argue more than the suffering.
That's actually a great point.
You see what I'm saying? So like, was that okay? And was it just when like all of a sudden like some white people began to open their eyes and like, well, no, I actually don't like this and it doesn't make me happy. And as soon as the balance tipped to like, now there's less happiness, okay, it's wrong, let's stop.
So the reason I think that's such a good example is because you're showing some people that are totally happy. I think you can make an equally interesting argument for hedonism. Like, why not just like live a life of nothing but, you know, earthly pleasures or whatnot? I think you still are forced to look at aggregate suffering, not just 50%, 51%. I'm going for 100%. And so I'm not cool with 49% slavery or whatever it might take to make the other 51% happy. I think when you're looking at humanity as a whole, I mean, you got to look at humanity as a whole for the context of suffering. You got to look at conscious beings, really, when you're talking about suffering.